Good evening, good evening, and welcome to a special edition of Network and Chill that will be hosted tonight by myself, Miss Bridget Yelder. I'm happy to have you all on tonight. Tonight, this is a special edition of Network and Chill, and I wanted to have a little discussion on the warning signs of an abuser. Network and Chill is sponsored by Divine Excellence, and Divine Excellence is also an organization that is powered by myself and others who are survivors and overcomers of domestic violence. And domestic violence has been a part of my experience in the past and has taught me a lot about relationships and how to look out for things that I just was not prepared for. There were things that were happening in my connections with men and women, not just in romantic relationships, but in friendships and uh, just dating, even in business and work relationships. These warning signs can be helpful for you to be aware of. And I really want to just focus on two on tonight. As you join the live version of this broadcast, would you please be willing to type your name and where you are chiming in from? Just type your name for me and where you are chiming in from. And I like to say hello to YouTube. We are live on YouTube tonight. So hello YouTube and thank you for joining. We are also live on Facebook. So hello Facebook and thank you all for joining. And as you come into the live, please put your name and where you are chiming in from. So tonight, I was I would say today I was going about my day and doing what I do, and it dropped into my heart to do this on tonight because I did not know why initially it dropped into my heart, but when it does, I pretty much make the decision to do it because I know when it comes to me, it needed to be done, and I had a conversation after this came to my heart, and it really confirmed to me why I needed to talk about this. I am the author of three books, and two of those books I share some of my experiences with domestic violence and how I experienced domestic violence in my marriage. I got married at the age of 20, and I went into marriage because of my background and me being raised in church and wanting to do right by the Lord. I did not want to shack. I did not want to be the person who was living in fornication or whatever. That's what I was taught. We didn't do that. So I got married so that I could be pleasing in the Lord's sight. And the person that I married was not the person for me. After I married this man, maybe 30 days after, he literally looked at me and said, I married you and I don't have to do anything now. And here it is, 22 years later, I have officially filed for divorce and I still have not received the signature from this man because of one of these behaviors that I'm going to discuss on tonight. And one of those behaviors is control, and the other one is isolation. The first one is isolation. And before I get started into what these two behaviors are, I want to talk about love. And a lot of times we get into relationships and we are looking for love and we're expecting um, someone to come into our lives and really love us, and that love is supposed to be so amazing and wonderful until it pushes us to do I mean just the way that we're introduced to love in a fairy tale sense It's like, that love is supposed to be so amazing that, you're just gonna float on air, and that's not reality. And a lot of times our perception of love is not correct. This is something that I say a lot, which is many of us don't know love, we know manipulation. Because we put stipulations on love. I love you as long as you are, or I love you if you act like, or if you do, or if, and now let me be clear, I must put this disclaimer out here. I do not use love as a bridge to accept bad behavior. I don't do that. I do not allow my love for a person to tell me that I am going to accept bad behavior. I can accept the behavior. I mean, I can separate the behavior from the person, but accepting that let me say it again. I can separate that behavior from the person. I can love that person, but that behavior cannot be tolerated, because what happens when you start to tolerate unacceptable behavior, then that tells the other person that you're fine with this, that you're fine with being treated this way, and nothing is wrong with them doing you this way, and that you're all in for this behavior. And then when you try to, if you don't initially identify something that you don't agree with in the beginning, and then you try to go back, maybe like, let's say a month later, and say to that person, or maybe a year later, and say to that person, you know what, I never really liked that behavior. That person at that time can really feel like, well, you went along with it for this long, so why are you now having a problem with this behavior that I exempt? I showed you this behavior for however long, and now you have a problem with it, and you don't want to accept me because of this behavior. And they become defensive, they can become combative, and they can even become violent because you try to push away from that behavior, because it was something that you never liked in the beginning, but you didn't have the confidence to say that from the beginning. So that starts a pattern, that that person is like, okay, so now who are you? They don't know who you are because you never said how you really felt about that behavior. And I did that. I was a person, I would let stuff go, let it go, let it go. And I really didn't like it, but I didn't have the courage to speak up for me. I would just do anything because I felt like if I love this person, I am supposed to accept, their behavior, good or bad, you know, even if it was detrimental to me, I'm supposed to accept it and just go along, and maybe they'll change, and maybe it'll get better. Have you ever had somebody tell you, hey, just hold on, it'll get better? And that type of action on our part, it doesn't just get better on its own. Relationships are work, so you have to work on them. Okay, so I want to begin by sharing a part of this scripture of what love really is, so that we don't have to be in a wondering state on what love really is. And this is a scripture that comes from First Corinthians 13, verse 4 through 8. It's very familiar. Some people may know it. Some people can almost quote this, but I'm reading the New International Version of this scripture, and it says, "Love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it does not dishonor others, it is not self seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails." And that is First Corinthians 13, verses 4 through 8. And when people ask me about love, I always reference that scripture. I reference that scripture because I believe that that is a very good description and accurate description of love. Do I get all of those parts of love right all the time? No. No, I do not. But what I want to focus on tonight are the warning signs of an abuser. When you get into a relationship, you're excited, you're happy, you're spending time with each other, and really you don't really introduce who you are when you first meet a person. You introduce your representative. You introduce the cute you. You introduce the done you. You introduce the one that has the hair ready. You introduce the one that never takes off her makeup. You introduce the one that won't let him see you without that wig on. You introduce your representative when you first get together, and you don't really introduce who you really are until little time goes by. And then after a little time goes by and you start to see who the other person is and who you really are inside of this relationship, inside of this connection, inside of what you all have going on. You see a little bit better past the butterflies and the lilies and the roses. You start to see who you are and who the person really is. And in this, you start to notice behaviors. The first behavior I want to talk about is isolation. When you meet someone and you introduce them to the way that you live, let's say for example you're a family person and you love being around your family, or you have friends that you like to be around. You may like to be around your parents. I mean, just say you're a family person and that is important to you. And this person doesn't really like the person that you're connected with, they don't like that. And they're not willing to compromise on that to be in your life. And they don't want to let you go, but they want you to adhere. And let's say they want you to settle for the type of behavior they want you to present. And if you don't present that, then they're not happy with you. And the first thing that they want to do is isolate you. So in order to isolate you, they begin to say or complain about their relationship with the people that you love. Now, this is another disclaimer. I am not a therapist. I am not a doctor. And this is just a general overview of some of the experiences that I have had with isolation and control. And I'll give an example. In one of my books, the book entitled "I Got Away," in "I Got Away," I write about a relationship that I was in with a guy I met. I met this guy out partying with my friends one night, and I was so impressed with the guy because he worked for a very popular record label, and he was giving out CDs. The CD that he was giving out was the one that I really wanted for my birthday, and so I was impressed by that. And he was from New York, and he just, I love him. I'm Southern, so I love a man with an accent outside of mine because I felt like, the up north men had a good talk to themselves. Or I love a man who has an accent from New Orleans. That's my other favorite. But I just felt so impressed by this person that I ignored a lot of the warning signs. I ignored a lot of the signs that were there because I really didn't recognize it. This gentleman began to, in the beginning, he was fun. We hung out, we went to events. I got to meet famous people. He was everything. He introduced his representative to me. And about let's say about a month later, maybe 90 days later into the relationship, I started to see who he really was because something happened that he did not like between myself and my roommate and him. And at that point that something happened that he didn't like, he snapped. And he went from being who I thought he was to just somebody else. And he immediately started to want to isolate me. And what happened was my roommate moved out of the apartment and she took something that did not belong to her, it belonged to him. And so he began to want to isolate me from everybody because of what she did. He would tell me, none of these people are your friends, my coworkers. He literally called one of my good friends and told her, I don't want to talk to her anymore. He took my phone. Just I didn't even have control over my own phone. And I stayed with this guy. And matter of fact, he was in my apartment. The apartment was in my name because after dating him for 90 days, I invited this man into my home. Big mistake. Don't do that. Don't do that. I wouldn't recommend that. I wouldn't recommend. After 90 days, and some people may call that old fashioned, but it's a reason why you want to give time to being in a connected relationship with people because like I said, most times when you meet people, they don't introduce who they really are. They introduce a representative. And there are some of us who are able to be who we are from day one, but you still put on, it's just like going on a job. When you go on the interview, you don't go on the interview, late. You don't go sloppy. You don't go any kind of way. You put your best foot forward. So it's the same way in a relationship. You put your best foot forward. But after time, it don't even have to be 90 days. It could be 6 months or a year or 2 years. This person can show you who they really are, and they begin to want to isolate you from your friends and your family. And the reason that they want to isolate you is because they want the second habit that I want to talk about, which is control. They want to control you. And if they cannot control your decisions, your habits, or whatever, it can become violent very quickly. And in the story that I shared, that situation became violent very quickly and it lasted for a while. I think, well, it lasted for 3 months. Those 3 months seemed like 3 years to me because in that time, this man did all types of things to me that was, I mean, I never thought that it would happen to me. And he had completely isolated me in the fact that he stopped me from working my job. He started complaining about me working at night. I worked in a restaurant overnight hours. He didn't like the fact that I worked overnight. So he told me he didn't want me working overnight, but I still was going because I was like, I cannot be at home with this man and not have any money. But he literally came to my job. He clowned, he acted a fool. He started confusion on my job until they just asked me not to come back to that particular location because of what he did. So he did everything he could to isolate me from everything and everybody just so he could have control of me. Once he gained that control of me, then I was pretty much like Play-Doh in his hands. He could do whatever he wanted to do with me because he had control not just of my body, but my mind. He had me afraid of him. He would do things on purpose to intimidate me, to make me fearful of him. He would beat me and ask me why I won't fight back. And if I tried to fight back, he would beat me even worse. And I mean, when a person can hit you so hard that you pray to God and ask God to just let you die because the pain is so bad from somebody beating you. This man slapped me in my face 16 times and one side of my face was completely swollen. I looked like an alien, and this was all tactical. He was not doing this just to be doing it. He wanted me to be completely afraid of him so that he can control me. And did it start out like that? No. Did I see that happening when I was excited to meet him? No. I did not see that happening. He did very nice things for me in the beginning, but once again, you don't meet the real person every time you meet the representative. So, this is one tip that I want to leave with you to identify if you are being controlled. And the tip is when you are not free to make your own decision, you are being controlled. When you are not free to make your own decision about anything that's happening in your life, you're being controlled. Being in a relationship does not mean that you should completely submit to someone telling you what to do every step of the way. I don't believe that. I don't believe that you cannot be your own person and still be in a committed relationship with someone else. I believe that you can act as an individual, and when you come together to build and have something meaningful and something that is full of the love that I described from the Bible, not control. There is nothing in that scripture that said love is controlling. There was nothing in that scripture that identified love with being having you isolated away from everything and everybody, because it's so important that you know that you know that you know for sure that you be able to recognize if a person is literally trying to isolate you from everything. And if this has happened to you already, this is a warning sign. And I give this tip in my book that have you a safe friend. If you do decide to live with your mate, I can't tell you what, I don't even do that. However, you decide to go about your relationship, and some people are married and dealing with this, so however you decide to go about your relationship, I cannot instruct you on that. But you still need to recognize, because I was married dealing with isolation and control. My ex-husband is very controlling. And just me even approaching him to do something as simple as put a signature on divorce papers. Our children are grown. I paid for the entire divorce. It's not going to cost him any money. All he has to do is sign. And I've asked him repeatedly to sign the papers, but he hasn't done it because that's like a sign of control of me trying to tell him what to do. And a controlling person doesn't want to be controlled. I left this definition on Facebook for those of you who are watching this, and if you catch the replay or you go on my page, you can see this definition of controlling behavior. Controlling behavior is when one person expects, compels, or requires others to cater to their own needs, even at the expense, even at the expense of others. The controlling person targets an individual and dominates them in an unhealthy, self-serving manner. Bridget was a target. I was targeted by a couple of men because they knew there was something about my energy that was desperate. There was something about my energy, and my desperateness did not come from a bad place. I just wanted to be loved. I wanted to be accepted. I wanted to have that dream relationship. I wanted to have that. So I went along to get along a lot of times in my life in the relationships that I was in, and never spoke my truth, never was true to who I was. So I kept getting what I didn't want because I would not be true to myself. I wasn't reaping, I wasn't sowing seeds of truth. So truth never came back to me. It never came back to me. And I ended up in a position where I wasn't free to make my own decisions and I was being controlled for years. And I really want you, if you're listening to me on this broadcast, if you catch it live or you catch the replay, if you are dealing with a partner, whether it be male or female, that wants to isolate you from, and it doesn't just have to be family, it could be anything that you love, anybody that you love, and they want to tell you, if you love me, you would do this. Love should always be unconditional, not manipulated. If a person is telling you, if you love me, you would do Blase, blase, then that means that they have placed a condition on it and it's no longer love, it is now manipulation. And I'm using love as a form of manipulation to get a person to do what I want them to do. And now I can manipulate them. And the next step after that, is it could be deadly. It could really be deadly because most people who are controlling, they have low self-esteem, they have low confidence, and they don't believe in the laws of attraction. They don't believe in God's laws of sowing and reaping. They don't believe in any of those things because they have not seen it, and they use fear and they use manipulation. They use everything as a tactic to target you, to isolate you first and then control you because it's something lacking in them that wants to make them control you. And we have to be able to identify that in that person because it could really be deadly. And I'm speaking from pure experience, y'all. You don't want to get to the place where you allow this to go on and on and on and on and on. And then guess what? It could be someone, it's all out of abuse. And so abuse doesn't always start with someone putting their hands on you. Abuse most times begins in the mental. It's all up here. If they can get control of your mind, have you ever heard the statement, where the head goes, the body follows? If they get your head, then the rest of you is going to follow. And that's all that it requires. But this just was a little special edition that I wanted to share that information with you. And I hope that if you are dealing with any form of abuse and you need to contact or reach someone to get some help, you can find me on Facebook. You can find me on YouTube. You can find me on Instagram. I do have a group on Facebook that is called Enough, and it's spelled like an acronym. Enough stands for Educating, Nurturing, Outstanding, Uplifting, Godly Homes. And on that page, we have information. And if you need that information, send a request to be added to the group, and I will add you and help you get to the resources. I am connected with some people who are in a position to help you get out of that situation. And if you are in a place where you can make a different decision to step away from that, isolation and control are like two deadly weapons in a relationship. They can take things down really, really fast. And I don't want to see that happen to you. So if you can identify these two things, remember my tip that when you are not free to make your own decision, you are being controlled. And at that point, you need to make a decision to make another decision to decide, is this the way that I want to live my life? Is this serving me? Is this something that is growing me? Is this something that is benefiting my life as a whole? Is this something that 30 days from now, I'll be happy to see this present in my life? Check those behaviors, check those things that are happening, and don't ignore the warning signs. Okay, y'all? This is your hostess, Bridget Gelder, with a special edition of Network and Chill. And this Network and Chill was about um, identifying some warning signs of an abuser. And I do this because I always want to bring awareness to the things that some may not know. Some people do think they do feel or they were taught that this is normal. You're supposed to do what your husband say do. They were taught that, as it being normal. And they've taken that, and I mean, the Bible does still say women, wives should submit to their husband, but it also say the husband should submit to the wife. But a lot of times you get one side of that scripture, you don't get the whole scripture where it says that the husband and wife should submit to each other. It should not be one sided. So it should not be, I gotta do what my husband say do all the time, and your husband never make any kind of compromise with you. It's the give and take. Relationships are two-way streets, no matter whether they're romantic or business or personal. On the job, relationships are two-way streets, and you want to make sure that you're free to make your own decisions, because if you're not, you're being controlled, and you may want to consider doing something about that immediately, because after they isolate you, and isolation doesn't always have to be a physical act. Remember, it starts in the mental. So they're going to isolate you in the mind and get you to thinking thoughts that are totally outside of who you are, getting you to agree to behavior that you don't like, just so they can control you. And you don't want that to happen. So once again, if you need help, um, please by all means inbox me, contact me, and we will give you the number or the resources that we have available to us to get you that help. If you're in an abusive relationship, that's not love. Love is not controlling, and love does not seek to isolate you from everything and everybody. So I hope that something I said would be helpful to you all. If you don't catch this live, you can catch the playback, and it will be broadcasted on YouTube and on Facebook. I thank you all for joining me on tonight. You all be blessed, and good night.